The dream takes flight. The morning sun painted streaks of gold across the polished surface of the Boeing 787 as James Harrison stood on the tarmac of Richardson International Airport. His dark suit caught the early light, and his eyes reflected the determination of a man who had spent 15 years preparing for this moment. At 42, James had already accomplished what many considered impossible, founding Horizon Airways, the first black-owned major airline in the country. The aircraft before him wasn't just any plane, it was the culmination of his life's work. After serving 12 years as an Air Force pilot and earning countless commendations, James had spent his life savings and convinced investors to back his vision of an airline that would revolutionize commercial aviation with cutting-edge safety systems and unprecedented passenger comfort. Beautiful morning for a test flight, isn't it? The voice came from Richard Parker, Horizon's chief engineer and James's longtime friend from their Air Force days. Richard approached with a tablet in hand, his silver hair catching the sunlight. "Perfect morning," James replied, his voice carrying the quiet confidence that had become his trademark. "How are the pre-flight checks coming along?" "Everything's green across the board. The new safety system is performing exactly as designed." "We're ready when you are, Captain." James nodded, allowing himself a small smile. The proprietary safety system he had developed was what set Horizon apart, an AI-driven predictive maintenance program that could identify potential issues before they became problems. It was the kind of innovation that could change the industry forever. As they walked toward the terminal, a group of FAA officials emerged from the building. Leading them was Winston Clark, the head inspector, whose reputation for thoroughness was well known throughout the industry. James had expected this. The final inspection before Horizon's inaugural flight was crucial. "Mr. Harrison," Clark called out, his tone professionally neutral but his eyes carrying a hint of skepticism. "We need to review some documentation before the test flight can proceed." "Of course," James replied, maintaining his composure. "Everything's prepared in the conference room." The next hour was a meticulous examination of every permit, certification, and safety record. James answered each question with precision, drawing from his years of experience and thorough preparation. Yet with each response, he could sense the underlying current of doubt from certain members of the inspection team. "These safety innovations," one inspector remarked, peering over his glasses, "they're quite unconventional. Are you certain they meet all regulatory requirements?" "More than meet them," James responded firmly. "Our system exceeds every safety standard by a significant margin. The data is all there in the reports." The tension in the room grew as the questioning continued, becoming increasingly pointed. Finally, Clark cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrison, while your documentation appears to be in order, we have concerns about the experimental nature of your safety systems. We'll need to conduct additional reviews before we can approve the test flight." James felt his jaw tighten, but his voice remained steady. "Additional reviews? We've already completed every required inspection and certification. What exactly are these additional reviews meant to examine?" "Standard procedure," Clark replied, though his eyes wouldn't meet James's. "We need to ensure everything is appropriate." Richard, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "Appropriate? We've submitted more documentation and testing data than any other airline startup in the past decade. What's really going on here?" The silence that followed was deafening. James looked around the room, at the faces of people who held his dream in their hands, and saw what he had seen too many times before: prejudice masked as procedure, bias hiding behind bureaucracy. "I understand," James said finally, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone in the room pause. "You want to be thorough. But let's be clear about something: I've spent my entire career in aviation. I've flown combat missions, trained pilots, and developed safety systems that save lives. My color has nothing to do with my capabilities or the safety of this airline." The room fell silent. Clark shifted uncomfortably in his chair, while other inspectors avoided eye contact. It was Richard who broke the tension, pulling up detailed simulation results on the conference room's main screen. "Let me show you exactly how our safety system works," Richard began, his voice firm and professional. "These aren't just innovations, they're the future of aviation safety." As the presentation continued, James watched the inspector's expressions slowly change from skepticism to interest. The data was undeniable, the safety improvements revolutionary. By the end of the hour, even Clark seemed to be reconsidering his position. "Well," Clark said finally, closing his notebook. "Your technical documentation is impressive. We'll expedite our final review." He paused, then added, "I apologize if our scrutiny seemed excessive." James nodded, accepting the closest thing to an apology he was likely to get. As the inspectors filed out of the room, Richard turned to him. "You okay?" "I'm better than okay," James replied, looking out the window at his aircraft gleaming in the morning sun. "This is just the beginning. We're not just building an airline, Richard. We're changing the whole game." The sun had risen higher now, casting shorter shadows across the tarmac. James watched as ground crew members moved around his aircraft, preparing it for the upcoming test flight. Despite the morning's challenges, his resolve had only grown stronger. Horizon Airways wasn't just his dream, it was a statement to the world that excellence knows no color, and innovation comes from passion, not privilege. "Let's get ready for that test flight," he said to Richard, straightening his tie. "We've got history to make." Turbulent skies. The news about Horizon Airways' innovative safety system spread through the aviation industry like wildfire. 2 weeks after the successful test flight, James Harrison sat in his office, reviewing the latest round of media coverage. The Wall Street Journal had run a feature on Horizon's technological breakthroughs, and several aviation magazines were praising the airline's forward-thinking approach to safety. But with success came scrutiny, and not everyone was celebrating Horizon's rise. James's computer screen displayed an email from Marcus Whitman, CEO of Legacy Airlines, one of the country's largest carriers. The message was politely worded but carried an unmistakable threat: "Your unproven systems pose a risk to industry standards. We strongly suggest you reconsider your approach." "They're getting nervous," Richard commented, looking over James's shoulder at the email. "Legacy's stock dropped 3 points after our safety system announcement." James leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "They should be nervous. Our system works, and they know it. But this is just the beginning of their pushback." As if on cue, his phone buzzed with a news alert. A prominent aviation blog had published an article questioning the reliability of AI-driven safety systems, specifically citing untested startups as a potential danger to passenger safety. The article didn't name Horizon directly, but the implication was clear. "Coordinated hit piece," Richard muttered, scanning the article on his tablet. "They're trying to create doubt before we even get our first commercial flight off the ground." James stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Horizon Airways hangar where their second aircraft was being fitted with their proprietary safety system. "We knew this was coming. The old guard doesn't like change, especially not from outsiders." The next morning, James arrived at the office to find Christina Martinez, Horizon's head of public relations, waiting with a concerned expression. "We have a situation," she said, following him into his office. "Someone leaked internal testing data to the Aviation Authority." "What kind of data?" James asked, his voice sharp. "Early simulation results from 6 months ago, before we refined the system. They're using the preliminary findings to suggest our safety measures are unreliable." James felt his jaw clench. The leak wasn't an accident, someone was trying to destroy Horizon before it could fully take flight. He picked up his phone and dialed Richard's extension. "Get the current test results ready. All of them. We're going to need full transparency." But transparency wasn't enough to stop the avalanche of criticism that followed. Industry veterans appeared on business news channels, questioning whether a newcomer could be trusted with revolutionary aviation technology. The racial undertones in their criticism were subtle but clear to anyone paying attention. The pressure intensified when several potential investors suddenly backed out of their commitments. James received a call from his primary financier, Jonathan Wells, expressing concerns about the mounting negative publicity. "Look, James," Wells said, his voice carrying a note of resignation, "maybe we should consider partnering with one of the established airlines. Legacy has expressed interest in acquiring your technology." "Acquiring?" James repeated, his voice cold. "You mean burying it? They don't want to implement our system, they want to make sure no one else can." "Be reasonable," Wells urged. "This industry has established players for a reason. Sometimes it's better to work within the system than to fight it." James ended the call and sat in silence for a moment, remembering all the obstacles he'd overcome to get here. From being the only black pilot in his Air Force squadron to fighting for every investment dollar, he'd faced doubt and discrimination at every turn. But he'd never let it stop him. He called an emergency meeting with his core team. As they gathered in the conference room, he could see the worry on their faces. The past week had taken its toll on everyone. "They think they can pressure us into selling out or shutting down," James began, his voice steady and determined. "They think we'll crack under the scrutiny and the doubt. But they don't understand something fundamental about Horizon Airways." He stood up and walked to the window, gesturing at their aircraft on the tarmac. "We're not just building an airline. We're not just developing new technology. We're proving that innovation can come from anywhere, that excellence doesn't belong to any one group or establishment." Christina spoke up from her seat. "The media's already running with their narrative. How do we fight that?" James turned back to face his team, a plan forming in his mind. "We show them. We don't just tell people our system works, we demonstrate it. Live, public tests with full media coverage. We invite independent aviation experts to verify our results. We make it impossible to ignore the truth." Richard nodded slowly, catching on to James's strategy. "We could live stream the safety demonstrations. Show real-time data during test flights." "Exactly," James replied. "No more letting them control the narrative. We bring everything into the light." As the team began working on the logistics of the public demonstrations, James received another email from Marcus Whitman at Legacy Airlines. This one was more direct: "Final offer, sell to us now, or we'll make sure Horizon never gets off the ground." James forwarded the email to his legal team with a simple response: "Document everything. We're not backing down." That evening, as the sun set over the airport, James stood on the roof of the Horizon headquarters, watching one of their aircraft perform a routine maintenance check. The plane's lights blinked steadily against the darkening sky, a beacon of progress in an industry resistant to change. His phone buzzed with a message from Richard: "Test flight schedule confirmed for next week. Media list growing. We're all in." James smiled, feeling the familiar surge of determination that had carried him through countless challenges. Horizon Airways wasn't just his dream anymore, it had become a symbol of something bigger. And he was ready to fight for it, no matter what turbulence lay ahead. "Let them come," he muttered to himself, watching his aircraft glide smoothly through the evening sky. "We'll show them how high we can fly." Breaking through the clouds. The day of Horizon Airways' public safety demonstration dawned clear and bright. News vans lined the perimeter of Richardson International Airport, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like mechanical flowers tracking the sun. James Harrison stood at the podium before a sea of reporters, cameras flashing as he prepared to make his opening statement. "Today, we're not just showing you a new airline safety system," he began, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "We're demonstrating the future of aviation safety. No speculation, no rumors, just facts, live data, and transparent results." Behind him, Horizon's flagship aircraft gleamed in the morning light, its sophisticated sensors and monitoring equipment clearly visible to the gathered media. Richard Parker stood nearby with a team of independent aviation experts, explaining the technical specifications of their safety system. The AI doesn't just predict potential issues, Richard explained, pointing to real-time data streaming on large displays. It actively learns from every flight, making each subsequent journey safer than the last. As the demonstration began, James noticed Marcus Whitman from Legacy Airlines standing at the back of the crowd, his arms crossed and expression dark. Several other industry executives had also appeared, drawn by the publicity and the chance to witness either a triumph or a catastrophe. The test flight proceeded flawlessly. Pilots deliberately introduced minor system anomalies, and the AI detected and corrected each one before they could develop into actual problems. The independent experts watched in growing amazement as the system performed beyond their expectations. Dr. Amanda Torres, a leading aviation safety expert from MIT, stepped forward to address the media. "What we're seeing here isn't just an incremental improvement in airline safety," she announced. "This is a quantum leap forward. The predictive capabilities of this system are unprecedented." The mood began to shift as more experts voiced their approval. Even skeptical reporters found themselves nodding as they watched the system detect and respond to simulated emergencies faster than any human pilot could. But Legacy Airlines wasn't done fighting. During the question-and-answer session, a reporter from an industry journal stood up. "Sources suggest that Horizon's system has failed multiple internal tests. Can you comment on these allegations?" James didn't hesitate. "Those sources are referring to our development process, where we deliberately pushed the system to its limits to improve it. That's how innovation works. We test, we learn, we improve. The system you see today has passed every safety certification with unprecedented margins." He gestured to the independent experts. "Don't take my word for it. Ask them. Review the data. Everything is transparent and open for verification." The demonstration continued throughout the day, each test more impressive than the last. But the most dramatic moment came unexpectedly, when a Legacy Airlines flight on a nearby runway reported a potential hydraulic issue. Without hesitation, James made a decision that would change everything. "Our system detected that anomaly 10 minutes ago," he announced to the stunned crowd. He pulled up the live data feed, showing how Horizon's AI had picked up subtle variations in the other aircraft's performance patterns. Richard quickly contacted Legacy's ground crew, sharing the detailed diagnostic data. The potential issue was confirmed and addressed before it could become serious. Marcus Whitman's face turned several shades of red as he watched his own airline's emergency being averted by his rival's technology. The media went wild, with reporters rushing to update their stories. The headline practically wrote itself: "Rival Airline's Safety System Prevents Potential Legacy Airlines Incident." That evening, as the media trucks packed up and the experts filed their reports, James received an unexpected visitor in his office. Jonathan Wells, the investor who had suggested selling out to Legacy, stood in the doorway looking somewhat sheepish. "I underestimated you, James," he admitted. "And I underestimated what Horizon could become." James leaned back in his chair, studying the man who had nearly withdrawn his support. "It's a common mistake," he replied evenly. "Underestimating people, underestimating innovation, underestimating the power of doing what's right." Wells shifted uncomfortably. "The other investors want back in. With better terms than before." "I'm sure they do," James said, standing up to look out at his aircraft on the tarmac. "But the terms of engagement have changed. Horizon isn't just proving itself, we're redefining what's possible." As Wells left, Christina burst into the office with her tablet. "The response is overwhelming," she reported excitedly. "Major news networks are calling it a revolution in aviation safety. Social media is exploding with support. And you won't believe this, 3 other airlines have already reached out about licensing our system." James smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "And Legacy?" Their stock dropped 12 points after today's demonstration. There are rumors their board is calling an emergency meeting. Richard joined them, holding his own tablet. The best part? Airlines from Europe and Asia are calling. They're not just interested in the technology, they're interested in the whole horizon approach to innovation. James walked to the window, watching as the sun set behind his aircraft. The metal skin glowed orange and gold, like a phoenix ready to rise. Today wasn't just about proving our technology works, he said quietly. It was about proving that real change is possible. That the old ways aren't always the best ways. He turned to face his team, the people who had believed in his vision when few others would. But this is just the beginning. Tomorrow, we start proving that Horizon isn't just a better way to fly, it's the future of aviation itself. As night fell over the airport, the lights of Horizon's aircraft continued to blink steadily, no longer just signals in the darkness but beacons of change in an industry that had resisted it for too long. The clouds of doubt were finally breaking, revealing clear skies ahead, and Horizon Airways was ready to soar. The storm breaks. 3 months after the public demonstration, Horizon Airways was preparing for its first commercial flight. The company had secured routes across the country, and ticket sales were exceeding all projections. James Harrison stood in Horizon's operational control center, watching dozens of screens tracking weather patterns, flight paths, and system diagnostics. Final checks on Flight 101 are complete, Richard reported, joining him at the main display. Our first commercial flight is ready for boarding. The inaugural flight would carry not just passengers, but the hopes and dreams of everyone who had fought to make Horizon Airways a reality. Among the passengers were aviation journalists, industry experts, and even a few executives from competing airlines, all eager to experience Horizon's revolutionary safety system firsthand. But Legacy Airlines had one last card to play. Just hours before takeoff, an anonymous source leaked documents to the press claiming that Horizon's AI system had a critical vulnerability. The story spread rapidly across news networks and social media platforms. They're claiming our system could be hacked, Christina said, rushing into the control center with her tablet displaying the breaking news. They're saying passenger data could be compromised. James's expression remained calm, but his eyes hardened. They're desperate. They know once our first commercial flight succeeds, there's no stopping us. Suddenly, alarms blared across the control center. Richard's fingers flew across his keyboard as red warnings flashed on multiple screens. We're detecting unauthorized access attempts, he announced grimly. Someone's trying to breach our systems. James leaned forward, watching the attack unfold. They're not just spreading rumors, they're actually trying to hack us. But what happened next surprised everyone. Horizon's AI safety system didn't just detect the breach attempt, it traced it. On the main screen, a map appeared showing multiple points of origin for the cyber attack. One of them led directly to Legacy Airlines corporate headquarters. Got you, Richard whispered, his fingers still dancing across the keyboard. The system didn't just stop them, it collected evidence. James straightened up, his decision already made. Contact the FBI's cybercrime division. And get me a direct line to the FAA administrator. The next few hours were chaos. FBI agents arrived at both Horizon and Legacy headquarters. News helicopters circled overhead as word of the attempted breach spread. Social media exploded with theories and accusations. But through it all, James remained focused on one thing: Flight 101 had to take off on schedule. Horizon's first commercial flight would proceed as planned, carrying its passengers safely to their destination. As the boarding process began, James addressed the gathered passengers in the terminal. Today, you'll witness not just a flight, but a demonstration of unwavering commitment to safety and innovation. Some have tried to stop this moment, but they've only proved why it's so necessary. He paused, making eye contact with several nervous passengers. Our system didn't just prevent a cyber attack today, it showed why the future of aviation must be built on transparency and accountability. Every attempt to compromise safety must be met with absolute resistance, regardless of who's behind it. The passengers erupted in applause, their confidence bolstered by his words and the morning's events. As they began boarding, James received an urgent call from the FAA administrator. "Mr. Harrison," the administrator's voice was grave. "The evidence your system collected is damning. Legacy's board has called for Marcus Whitman's immediate resignation. But this goes beyond one airline or one CEO. We need to talk about industry-wide implementation of your safety protocols." James looked through the terminal windows at his aircraft, its pristine white fuselage emblazoned with the Horizon Airways logo. "I'm listening. Your system didn't just stop an attack, it proved that the entire industry needs to change. We're preparing new regulations that will require all commercial airlines to adopt similar safety measures. We want Horizon to help lead this transition." As Flight 101 prepared for takeoff, James stood in the control center with his team, watching as every system showed green. The aircraft began its roll down the runway, gathering speed until it lifted gracefully into the sky. "This is Horizon Flight 101, the pilot's voice crackled over the radio. "We are airborne. All systems nominal. The future of aviation is officially underway." Christina wiped tears from her eyes as cheers erupted throughout the control center. Richard clapped James on the shoulder, both men watching their dream soar into the clear blue sky. "You know what this means, don't you?" Richard asked quietly. "Every airline will need our system now. The industry will never be the same." James nodded, his eyes still following the aircraft's ascent. That was always the goal. Not just to build a better airline, but to force the entire industry to be better. To prove that safety and innovation aren't just buzzwords, they're obligations we owe to every passenger who trusts us with their life. As Flight 101 climbed through the clouds, James received another call, this time from Jonathan Wells. "The other investors want to know what's next," Wells said excitedly. "Where does Horizon go from here?" James smiled, watching as more passengers lined up at Horizon's check-in counters, eager to be part of aviation history. Now we show them what's possible when you refuse to let fear, doubt, or discrimination hold you back. We show them how high humanity can soar when we embrace change instead of fighting it. The storm had broken, and in its wake, the skies ahead were clearer than ever. Horizon Airways hadn't just survived, it had changed the future of flight itself. And for James Harrison, this was still just the beginning. Clear skies ahead. 1 year after Horizon Airways' first commercial flight, James Harrison stood before a different crowd. The grand ballroom of the National Aviation Museum was filled with industry leaders, government officials, and aviation pioneers. But the faces that meant the most to him were those of the young students from inner-city schools, invited as special guests to witness this moment. Innovation isn't just about technology, James began his keynote address. It's about having the courage to challenge the status quo, even when everyone tells you it can't be done. The past year had transformed the aviation industry. After the attempted cyber attack and Legacy Airlines' subsequent scandal, the implementation of Horizon's safety system had become mandatory for all commercial airlines. Marcus Whitman had faced federal charges, and Legacy Airlines had undergone a complete restructuring. But more importantly, Horizon Airways had become a symbol of change. Their success had opened doors for other innovators who had previously been shut out of the industry. The company's commitment to diversity and inclusion had set new standards, and their apprenticeship program was helping underprivileged youth pursue careers in aviation. When we started this journey, James continued, gesturing to the screen behind him showing Horizon's growing fleet, people said we were trying to fix something that wasn't broken. But we weren't just fixing aviation, we were reimagining it. Richard sat in the front row, nodding as James spoke. Their partnership had grown stronger through every challenge, and now they were working on the next generation of aviation safety technology. Christina, recently promoted to Chief Communications Officer, sat beside him, already planning how to share this moment with the world. Today, I'm proud to announce the Horizon Initiative, James revealed, bringing up new slides. A $500 million investment in aviation education and innovation, focused on communities that have historically been excluded from our industry. The announcement drew gasps and applause. The initiative would provide scholarships, training programs, and seed funding for new aviation startups. It was more than just a charitable effort, it was a systematic approach to transforming the industry from the ground up. But we're not stopping there, James continued. Today, we're also unveiling our next breakthrough, the world's first completely carbon-neutral commercial aircraft, powered by sustainable energy and managed by our enhanced AI safety system. The screen displayed images of Horizon's newest aircraft, its revolutionary design representing the future of sustainable aviation. The young students in the audience leaned forward in their seats, their eyes wide with possibility. "This isn't just about flying anymore," James said, his voice carrying the weight of experience and the excitement of continued innovation. "It's about showing the world that when we embrace diversity, of people, of ideas, of dreams, we can achieve things that once seemed impossible." After the presentation, James made his way through the crowd, stopping to speak with the students. One young girl, no more than 12, raised her hand nervously. "Mr. Harrison," she asked, "did you always know you could do all this?" James crouched down to meet her eyes. "No," he answered honestly. "But I knew I had to try. Sometimes that's all we can do, try, even when others say we can't. Because you never know who you might inspire along the way." Later that evening, James stood on the observation deck of Horizon's newest terminal, watching aircraft take off and land. Richard joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Remember when they said we'd never get off the ground?" Richard mused, handing James a cup. James laughed softly. "Seems like a lifetime ago. Now every major airline uses our system, and half of them are run by people who used to tell us it couldn't be done." "And legacy airlines?" "Their new CEO called this morning," James replied. "They want to partner on the carbon-neutral technology. Times really do change." As they watched another Horizon aircraft lift into the sunset, James thought about all the barriers that had fallen, all the doors that had opened.